You've felt it before, that quiet urge to turn off your phone, ignore the messages, and just be alone. We all crave solitude from time to time. But what happens when that solitude never ends? What if days of silence turned into weeks, and weeks into months of total social isolation? Most people believe the greatest danger is loneliness. But according to one of the most brilliant and controversial psychologists in history, Carl Jung, that's not even close to the real story. He made a terrifying discovery. When your brain is deprived of all human contact, it doesn't just get sad, it begins a radical and dangerous transformation. Jung argued that true isolation forces an unavoidable encounter with your shadow self, all the dark, repressed, and denied parts of your own mind. It's a process so powerful, it can shatter your sense of reality, overwhelm your ability to reason, and push you to the very brink of madness. In this video, we will walk through Jung's roadmap of what happens to the human psyche when it is cut off from the world. We'll explore how the brain's energy turns inward, triggering a descent into a dark night of the soul. We will see how this journey can break down the very structures of rational thought, leading to psychosis, hallucinations, and delusions. But we'll also uncover Jung's most profound insight, that if you can survive this terrifying descent, it holds the secret to profound self-discovery and a more authentic life than you ever thought possible. So, what truly happens when you are left completely alone with your own mind? The answer is far more extreme than you can imagine. Let's begin. Social withdrawal begins the moment you stop answering your phone. It's that deliberate turning away from social interactions, the conscious choice to exist in isolation rather than face another superficial conversation. But what you might not realize is that this social withdrawal, this purposeful disconnection from the external world, triggers something far more profound than simple loneliness. Your brain, deprived of its usual social interactions and external validation, immediately activates what Carl Jung called the inversion of psychic energy. Where once your thoughts flowed outward toward others, now they turn inward with startling intensity. This isn't just loneliness. That painful state Jung distinguished as the inability to communicate what seems important to you. This is something more dangerous and potentially transformative. Within days of sustained isolation, your perceptions begin to shift. The defense mechanisms that normally protect your ego from uncomfortable truths start to weaken. Without the constant noise of social feedback, the carefully constructed barriers between your conscious mind and unconscious content begin to dissolve. Your thoughts become unfiltered, raw, and often terrifying. Jung observed that isolation acts as a powerful catalyst, forcing what he termed a direct encounter with the very psychic structures the conscious mind is structured to defend against. Your brain, suddenly stripped of external stimulation and social validation, pulls energy inward with such force that dormant psychological material surges into awareness. This is where social withdrawal reveals its true nature, not as simple avoidance, but as an archetypal descent into the depths of your own psyche, where the real work of self-discovery begins. Carl Jung revolutionized our understanding of what happens when social withdrawal deepens into genuine solitude. Unlike his contemporary Sigmund Freud, Jung saw this isolation not as pathological regression, but as the essential crucible for individuation, the process of becoming a whole, undivided individual. Solitude, Jung wrote, is the highest and most decisive experience of all for self-discovery. But what exactly does Carl Jung mean by solitude? It's not simply being alone. It's the active engagement with your inner world when external distractions fall away. Your thoughts, no longer filtered through social expectations or the need to maintain acceptable communication, begin to reveal their true nature. Jung observed that this creates what he called a psychic vacuum that pulls unconscious content directly into awareness. Here's where it gets fascinating. Your limbic system, the brain's emotional center, interprets this solitude as both threat and opportunity. The primitive alarm systems fire, flooding you with impulses that feel foreign and overwhelming. Yet simultaneously, Jung discovered, this very activation allows access to what he termed the collective unconscious, the deeper layers of psyche containing universal patterns of human experience. In solitude, your internal communication shifts dramatically. Instead of the constant chatter of social interaction, you begin what Jung called active imagination, a dialogue with the autonomous figures of your unconscious mind. These aren't hallucinations, but encounters with the deeper structures of personality that normally remain hidden. Carl Jung understood that this process, while essential for psychological growth, carries immense risk, which is why the descent into unconscious territory often manifests as the very depression and anxiety we'll explore next. Depression emerges as the inevitable companion of Jung's solitude, but not in the way you might expect. This depression, what Jung called a necessary grounding force, arrives as your psyche's response to encountering material that the conscious mind has spent years repressing. It's not a malfunction, it's a signal that the deeper work has begun. As Carl Jung's unconscious activation intensifies, anxiety floods your system with overwhelming intensity. This anxiety represents your ego's terror at losing control, its desperate attempt to maintain the familiar patterns that solitude has begun to dissolve. Your nervous system becomes hyperactive, interpreting every shadow, every unexpected thought, every emerging impulse as a potential threat to your carefully constructed identity. The obsessions that arise during this phase aren't random intrusions. They're messengers from the unconscious, demanding attention to aspects of yourself you've long denied. Jung observed that these obsessions often center around themes of mortality, meaning, and authenticity. Suicidal ideation, when it emerges, reflects what Jung termed ego death. Not literal death, but the psychological dissolution of false identities. This is where stress compounds exponentially. Your body, already strained by isolation, now bears the additional burden of processing intense psychological material without the usual social supports. Fear becomes your constant companion. Not just fear of external threats, but existential fear of what you're discovering about yourself. Jung's revolutionary insight was that this depression serves a crucial function. It brings individuals who have become too high and aloof in the upper air back down to the humbling reality of their humanity. The darkness isn't punishment, it's preparation for the integration work that must follow. Yet this descent into depression and anxiety creates dangerous territory where rational thought begins to fragment, setting the stage for even more severe cognitive disruption. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive center responsible for rational thought and decision-making, begins to buckle under the psychological pressure of sustained isolation. This region, which normally maintains your reasoning abilities and keeps emotional impulses in check, finds itself overwhelmed by the flood of unconscious material that Jung's solitude has unleashed. As depression and anxiety intensify from the previous phase, your prefrontal cortex loses its regulatory grip on cognitive processing. The reasoning that once helped you navigate complex decisions becomes clouded and unreliable. What Jung observed was that this cognitive breakdown isn't accidental. It's the ego's structured defenses finally giving way to deeper psychological truths. Your moral judgment, typically anchored in social conditioning and rational analysis, begins to shift dramatically. The ethical frameworks you've relied upon start dissolving as the persona, Jung's term for your social mask, crumbles away. Without external social validation to reinforce these moral structures, your prefrontal cortex struggles to maintain consistent ethical reasoning. Memory becomes increasingly unreliable during this phase. The cognitive resources normally dedicated to clear recollection are now overwhelmed by processing intense emotional content from the unconscious. Your ability to distinguish between past and present experiences weakens as archetypal material floods conscious awareness. This deterioration of rationality represents what Jung called the ego's necessary defeat, the rational mind's inability to contain or control the vast territories of the psyche it encounters in true solitude. The prefrontal cortex, despite its sophisticated cognitive abilities, simply cannot process the symbolic, non-linear language of the unconscious. As reasoning, moral judgment, and memory continue to fragment, the stage is set for even more extreme manifestations, the complete breakdown of consensus reality through hallucinations and delusions. Social withdrawal reaches its most dangerous extreme when the prefrontal cortex's collapse opens the door to complete reality distortion. This isn't gradual. It's a sudden crossing of a psychological threshold where isolation transforms from therapeutic solitude into pathological disconnection from consensual reality. Your health deteriorates rapidly at this stage, as the physical body bears the cumulative burden of weeks or months without meaningful human contact. The stress hormones that have been flooding your system since the beginning of this journey now wreak havoc on immune function, cardiovascular health, and neurological stability. Insomnia becomes your constant tormentor, creating a vicious cycle that accelerates psychological breakdown. Sleep deprivation compounds every other symptom. Your already fragmented reasoning becomes further impaired, emotional regulation disappears entirely, and the boundary between dream consciousness and waking awareness dissolves. Time perception warps beyond recognition during this phase. Minutes feel like hours, days blend into nights, and your internal chronometer, normally synchronized by social interactions and external routines, loses all calibration. Jung warned that without the anchoring effect of consensual reality, the psyche becomes unmoored from linear time. This is where hallucinations emerge, not as random neurological misfires, but as the unconscious mind's attempt to create the social contact that social withdrawal has eliminated. You begin seeing people who aren't there, hearing conversations from empty rooms, feeling touches from phantom presences. Delusions follow closely behind hallucinations as your mind constructs elaborate explanatory frameworks for these impossible experiences. Jung observed that these delusions often contain profound symbolic truth, but without proper containment, they represent the unconscious's complete assimilation of the ego, what he called psychic fragmentation. Yet even at this extreme edge, Jung believed redemption remained possible through the deliberate restoration of authentic human connection. Socialization becomes the ultimate test of whether your journey through isolation has led to genuine transformation or pathological retreat. This return to human connection, what Jung called the hero's mandate, determines whether the profound inner work of social withdrawal will bear fruit in authentic relationships or remain trapped in narcissistic self-absorption. The quality of your social interactions after prolonged isolation reveals everything about the success of your psychological descent. If you've truly integrated the shadow material and unconscious content that emerged during solitude, your communication transforms from projection-based neediness to authentic expression rooted in wholeness. You no longer seek validation from others because you found an inner source of meaning through connection to the self. Your thoughts, once fragmented by isolation and overwhelmed by unconscious material, now flow with clarity and purpose during social encounters. The perceptions that became so distorted during extreme withdrawal are gradually recalibrated through healthy social feedback and consensual reality testing. This isn't about returning to your old patterns, it's about forging entirely new ways of relating. Jung observed that authentic socialization after individuation work creates what he called companionship that thrives when each individual remembers their individuality. You're no longer desperately seeking completion through others or unconsciously projecting your disowned qualities onto friends and partners. Community connection becomes possible precisely because you've learned to be genuinely alone. The great paradox Jung discovered is that only by courageously embracing the state of being alone can we develop the capacity for the most profound social interactions. Having found yourself in the depths of isolation, you're now able to truly meet another person as they are, not as who you need them to be. Social withdrawal, when navigated with consciousness and courage, transforms from crisis into calling, the necessary descent that enables authentic ascent into genuine human connection. So, we have journeyed from a simple closed door to the very edge of the human psyche and back again. We've seen that in Carl Jung's view, complete social withdrawal is not a passive state of loneliness. It is an active, powerful, and dangerous process. It begins with the mind's energy turning inward, forcing a confrontation with our shadow. This descent can lead through overwhelming depression and anxiety, challenge the very limits of our rational thought, and even risk a complete break from reality into psychosis. Yet, as Jung so brilliantly proposed, this is not just a path to destruction. It is the crucible for individuation, the hero's journey. If navigated with courage, it allows us to return to the world not broken but transformed, capable of a more authentic connection than ever before. The ultimate paradox is that only by truly learning to be alone can we finally learn how to genuinely be with others. What are your thoughts on Jung's challenging idea that we must face our inner darkness to become whole? Share your perspective in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you found this exploration into the mind valuable, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into psychology and philosophy. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we take within.